This story is about a civil servant named Shin Akiyasu, who becomes the first test subject to participate in a new government law called the NEET Protection Act. In this project, Shin is to be married to an unemployed young woman named Himari Sawamoto, while at the same time rehabilitating her so she can return to society. However, the problem is that Himari did not sign up for the program of her own will. Will this arranged marriage program succeed? With the declining birth rate and aging population, as a countermeasure against the increasing number of unemployed youth, the government has passed an experimental bill known as the NEET law. Its target is young adults who are unemployed. They will be married to those who already have jobs. But before it is implemented nationwide, trial runs will gradually be carried out by civil servants. One of the civil servants chosen for the very first trial is Shin Akiyasu. His reason for agreeing to become an experimental subject is simply to earn a promotion. With confidence, Shin heads toward his future partner's home. However, upon arrival, he encounters commotion among the neighbors, who had found a girl named Himari Sawamoto collapsed on the floor. But it turns out to be just a misunderstanding. It is revealed that Himari is a hikikomori, a phenomenon among adolescents or young adults who withdraw and shut themselves away from social life. To calm the situation, Shin quickly introduces himself, saying he is Himari's husband. Of course, the girl is shocked to suddenly meet a stranger who claims to be her husband. Shin explains that he has actually been assigned to be her husband because Himari had once been registered for the protection trial program. Now, she is the first person selected as a subject under the NEET law, which makes her Shin's wife. The program itself is part of the Japanese government's effort to solve social problems involving NEETs, unemployed young adults, caused by low birth rates, an aging population, and other unresolved issues. Shin's superior had warned him that if he failed, he would never be promoted. As for Himari, she is now 21 years old. After graduating from middle school, she never continued her education. Instead, she dedicated her life to caring for her sick grandparents. Once they passed away, Himari lived alone with only a cat named Momotaro, since she had no other family or relatives. Before her grandmother died, she had promised not to let her granddaughter live alone, and so it was the grandmother who registered Himari in the NEET protection program, without Himari's knowledge. Shin tries to explain that the goal of the program is to help people who have nothing, no job and no social life, so that eventually they can return to society. But Himari insists on cancelling, since it was her grandmother who applied for her without her consent. Nothing Shin says can change her mind. Himari believes she can continue living on her own with her cat Momotaro, the only family she has left. Seeing her sad expression, Shin decides to leave, unable to force the girl against her will. As Shin was leaving the house, a neighbor approached him and asked about Himari's condition. The neighbor also shared stories about how Himari used to be a cheerful, diligent, and very friendly girl. But ever since her grandmother passed away 6 months ago, Himari rarely went outside. It seemed that because she had no relatives left, she had become extremely lonely. Shin reflected on Himari's situation and felt that maybe it wasn't too late to save her life. He decided to try once again to speak to her about his good intentions. However, before he could press the doorbell, Himari suddenly came out carrying her cat, which was in a very weak state. Without hesitation, Shin decided to help her and rushed the cat to an animal hospital. There, Shin saw the deep worry etched on Himari's face, caught between the fear of losing her beloved cat and the uncertainty of how she would go on living alone. After the veterinarian examined Momotaro, Himari felt relieved to learn that the cat's life could be saved. Realizing that what Himari needed most right now was family, Shin once again urged her to marry him. He hoped that through marriage, Himari would no longer be alone and might find happiness for herself. For Shin, it didn't matter if Himari didn't love him, as long as she could learn to love herself. Shin's words reminded Himari of her grandmother, who had once said something very similar. Out of gratitude for saving her cat, Himari finally softened and agreed to marry Shin. She even accepted Shin living in her house, as long as they kept separate rooms. Although she didn't know him very well yet, Himari could feel Shin's kindness. Of course, her worries still remained, But she thought that having Shin by her side might be better than living alone, even if it wasn't forever. However, married life wasn't as easy as Shin had imagined. He encountered many problems in the old house, which was in poor condition and in need of urgent repairs. For that reason, he took Himari shopping for household supplies at a home center. Himari's face lit up with joy. This was the first time she had gone somewhere different. Shin himself was a bit stunned by her appearance. She looked much cuter than usual, especially since, until then, Himari had always just worn pajamas, even when they went to register their marriage. It was understandable that this felt like a new experience for her, since previously she only went outside to shop at the local market. Even though Shin's actions seemed simple, they were enough to make Himari happy. While shopping, Himari briefly got separated from Shin, and he couldn't call her because she didn't own a cell phone. After some time, Shin finally found her. Himari was carrying a pair of couple mugs for the two of them. To prevent this kind of situation from happening again, Shin decided to buy her a cell phone. It turned out that Himari had never once owned a phone, let alone a smartphone. She was very excited and truly appreciated Shin's kind gesture. The next day, after returning from grocery shopping at the market, Himari found an elementary school boy hiding in her yard. After Shin asked him some questions, it turned out the child was Himari's neighbor's son, who had apparently run away from home. Feeling sorry for him, Himari immediately invited the boy, whose name was Takumi, to eat together with them. Not long after, someone outside was calling for Takumi. It turned out that the reason Takumi had run away was because he was upset with his father, who had broken his game console. Seeing another adult come to the house, Himari wasn't used to strangers and instinctively hid herself. Shin then explained to Takumi's father that his marriage with Himari was part of the newly enacted NEET law. Takumi's father gave him advice, saying that marriage is not just about status, but also about how both partners can complement one another. Those words made Shin realize that he may have been misunderstanding the true meaning of marriage. As promised, Shin brought Himari a new cell phone that day. She was delighted to receive it, as it was the very first smartphone she had ever owned. Meanwhile, Takumi, who was on school vacation, suddenly asked Himari to accompany him to the park the next day. Hearing this idea, Shin allowed it, thinking it would be a good chance for Himari to interact more with society. Coincidentally, Takumi's father, who was a novelist with plenty of free time, also joined them. However, when Shin returned home from work, he noticed the three of them coming back with gloomy expressions. It turned out that there had been a problem. Takumi had deliberately broken Himari's phone. The reason was that Takumi didn't like seeing Himari spending more time on the phone instead of playing with him, so he angrily smashed it. Himari felt regretful for disappointing Takumi after he had been so kind as to invite her out to play. Takumi also admitted that what he did was wrong. But later at home, Shin found Himari secretly crying. She blamed herself for not being more careful and for failing to understand others' feelings, which led to Shin's gift being ruined. What hurt her most was that the phone had been the very first present Shin had ever given her, and she had treasured it dearly. Her words touched Shin deeply, and he reassured her not to worry since the phone could still be repaired. Just as he was about to comfort her further, the doorbell rang. Unexpectedly, the visitors were his colleagues, Kohei and Yoshiura. Kohei was drunk, so Shin helped him to the toilet, while Yoshiura, a woman, spoke privately with Himari. Without hesitation, Yoshiura introduced herself not only as Shin's co-worker, but also revealed that she had dated him 2 years ago. Hearing this, Himari was shocked to learn that Yoshiura was Shin's ex-girlfriend. In truth, Yoshiura still often watched Shin from afar and had even asked him directly whether he truly loved Himari. But Shin only answered that he was doing all of this because it was his duty. That response angered Yoshiura even more, as she felt Shin always trivialized women's feelings. Once again, Yoshiura went to see Himari alone, this time to give her advice. She urged Himari to separate from Shin, saying he could never bring her happiness. Yoshiura explained that she had dated Shin for 4 years, so she knew firsthand how bad he could be. When their relationship ended, she had told Shin there was no point in continuing. And to her disappointment, Shin had agreed to break up immediately without offering any clear reason. From then on, Yoshiura believed that Shin had never truly loved her, or any woman for that matter. She also pointed out that if this experimental government marriage law failed, it would be postponed and reviewed again. This, Yoshiura feared, could lead to innocent women like Himari being exploited and forced into marriage by the state. That night, when Shin came home from work, he noticed that Himari looked completely different, far from her usual cheerful self. Showing him the divorce papers that Yoshiura had given her, Himari asked why Shin had been so cruel to hurt Yoshiura in the past. To her, 4 years of dating was a long time, yet Shin had dismissed Yoshiura's feelings so lightly. Not wanting Himari to misunderstand, Shin invited Yoshiura to talk together with them. In truth, Yoshiura's intention wasn't to take Shin back, seek revenge, or break him apart from Himari. Rather, she simply opposed the NEET law for ignoring the subject's feelings. For Yoshiura, marriage could never be enough without love, without seeing one's partner as the most important person. Himari deeply reflected on Yoshiura's words, which she thought carried some truth. Shin's successful life contrasted sharply with her own, which she felt held nothing special. In short, Himari believed she was unworthy of being Shin's wife, thinking he could find someone much better than her. Seeing the gloom on Himari's face made Shin realize that what he wanted most was to protect her smile. He didn't care whether Himari was the right woman for him or not. Since the moment they started living together, Shin had placed this marriage above his work. At the very least, by staying by Himari's side, Shin hoped that one day he could make his wife truly happy. Hearing Shin's determination, Yoshiura felt there was nothing more to discuss. She still opposed the NEET law, but at the same time, Himari and Shin's happiness was what mattered most. Though their relationship was not yet like a normal couple's, Shin believed that if he could make Himari happy, then he would surely feel happiness himself. However, there was one thing Shin had forgotten. He had not told his parents about this marriage. One day, quite suddenly, Shin's parents and younger brother showed up at Himari's house. They demanded to know why Shin had gotten married without telling them, especially since he hadn't returned home in 3 years. Finally, Shin explained that his marriage was part of the NEET law, with Himari chosen as the first subject. Upon hearing this, his mother became furious, questioning why a civil servant like Shin should be bound by such a law. Shin had never been close with his family. His mother often clashed with him, while his father was always too busy working and rarely communicated with his children. That was why Shin had once sworn not to marry, so he wouldn't become like his father. Even so, it didn't mean he hated his family. He firmly declared that he would continue this marriage, even if his parents opposed it. To ease the tense atmosphere, Shin's mother decided to cook something, and Himari immediately offered to help her mother-in-law. During their conversation, Shin's mother fell silent when she learned that Himari had been raised by her grandparents, who had since passed away. This meant Himari had no memories of what it was like to have parents, but now, meeting her in-laws, Himari felt an overwhelming happiness, as if she finally had a complete family. Shin's mother was deeply moved by Himari's story and showed her childhood photos of Shin, which Himari found adorable. Although Shin felt uncomfortable about troubling Himari with his family's sudden visit, Himari instead felt happy. From the beginning of living with Shin, every day had been a source of joy for her. She imagined Shin must have been raised in a kind environment as well. Looking at Shin's childhood photos, Himari thought that the reason Shin could smile in those pictures was because he was looking at his father standing in front of him. To her, that proved Shin truly loved his father. Himari's words opened Shin's eyes. He realized he had actually grown up in a good family. His parents too came to understand and gave their blessing, believing Shin and Himari could become a harmonious couple who complemented each other. Before his parents left, Himari apologized, saying she wasn't the ideal daughter-in-law and had many shortcomings. But Shin's parents thought otherwise. They believed they were the ones who should be grateful. Thanks to Himari's sincerity, the Akiyasu family, which had long been fractured, was finally reunited. One day, Himari learned that Sho, Shin's younger brother, would soon be celebrating his birthday. She decided to bake a birthday cake for him, but no matter how many times she tried, she kept failing. Even so, Himari didn't want to give up. When she ran out of flour, she went to buy some herself. On her way home, she happened to see Shin returning from work with his colleagues. Excited, she intended to cross the street to greet her husband, but Himari tripped and fell in the middle of the road. Seeing a vehicle speeding toward her, Shin instinctively rushed to save her. Fortunately, he acted in time, and Himari's life was spared. Shin couldn't hide his anger at Himari, calling her too careless. If he ever failed to protect her, he would carry the guilt for the rest of his life. So focused was he on Himari's condition that he didn't realize he had injured his own leg in the process. While tending to Shin's wound, Himari explained that she had gone to the supermarket because the market had run out of flour. Though Himari was still afraid of being in crowds, ever since Shin entered her life, she had been pushing herself to be braver and to get used to being around people. It wasn't just Himari who had changed. Shin, too, had begun opening his heart. Though he had once dated Yoshiura, Himari was the first person who had taught him the meaning of genuine love, shown by the way he desperately fought to protect the one he loved. However, ever since Shin had hugged Himari unexpectedly, she seemed to avoid him whenever he tried to touch her. There was even a moment when Shin almost kissed her while she was asleep, but Himari suddenly woke up and hurried away. Not wanting their relationship to grow awkward, Shin apologized for hugging her so suddenly, but Himari told him she hadn't meant to reject him. It was just an instinctive reaction, partly out of nervousness and partly because she wasn't used to being treated romantically by a man. Then, without warning, Himari pulled Shin's arm and softly kissed his cheek. Her gesture startled him, but also reassured him, as he realized Himari didn't dislike him after all. Still, one thing weighed heavily on Shin's mind. He couldn't allow Himari's life to be constantly monitored under the NEET law. The next day, he went to his superior to request both Himari's release as a NEET subject and his own resignation. Shin wanted to grant Himari's dream of living as an ordinary married couple. To him, this was the limit. Himari should no longer be treated as an experimental subject. Shin's decision to resign was opposed by his colleague Kohei, who believed Shin was foolishly throwing away his career just to protect something else. But there was something Kohei didn't know. Shin then revealed confidential documents, reports containing Himari's private details, even her most personal matters. This duty had become a burden to Shin, because continuing to file these reports felt like betraying Himari's trust. Later, Shin shared both his resignation plan and the existence of these confidential reports with Himari. To his surprise, Himari said she didn't mind if Shin reported all her private matters. She knew how hard he had been working under this law to save many people's lives. Looking back, it was thanks to the NEET law that she had met Shin, and now she felt truly happy. After thinking about Himari's words, Shin decided not to resign and instead finish the remainder of his duties. When he came home from work, he brought a special gift for Himari, a wedding ring that he had not been able to give her at the start of their marriage. The day before, Shin had already re-registered their marriage publicly, outside of the NEET law. He told her he would be happy if she wore the ring, as a reminder that she was his rightful wife. From that day on, Shin and Himari began sleeping in the same room, no longer wanting to be apart. But something else also began to change in Himari's life. She started to dream frequently about her childhood, specifically about the time when her mother abandoned her. Almost every night she suffered the same nightmare, leaving her wondering why she had to relive such painful memories just when she was starting to feel happiness with Shin. She also questioned whether this was some kind of sign that something would happen in her life. One day, while Himari was with Takumi, she suddenly collapsed. In her subconscious, she clearly relived the moment her mother left her. Again and again, she begged her mother not to go, promising she would be a good and obedient daughter, but her mother never looked back and simply walked away. When Shin heard the news that his wife had fainted, he rushed to the hospital. Luckily, Takumi and his father had already taken Himari there. At the hospital, Himari explained that she had been having strange dreams, but upon reflection she realized they weren't dreams at all. They were bitter childhood memories she had buried deep within herself, memories that had left her traumatized. From that day onward, Himari became more withdrawn, as though she were preoccupied with something. Of course, as her husband, Shin noticed the change in her demeanor and asked if she was unwell or troubled. Finally, Himari revealed that her fainting spell hadn't been due to illness. She was actually pregnant. The news shocked Shin, but also filled him with joy at the thought of becoming a father. Yet he was puzzled to see Himari's expression. She looked neither happy nor relieved, but rather anxious and confused. The nightmares continued to haunt her, disrupting her sleep, and Shin still couldn't understand what was truly happening inside her. One evening when Shin came home from work, Himari was gone. He tried to call her, but she hadn't brought her phone. In a panic, Shin searched the places she usually visited until he finally found her sitting alone on a park bench. It turned out to be the very spot where she had last seen her mother. That heartbreaking moment, being abandoned by her mother, was the trauma that had shaped her life. Since she never understood why her mother left, Himari had always blamed herself. Now that she was expecting a child, she was gripped by fear. Would she be able to become a good parent and take responsibility for raising her child? Not wanting to see his wife burdened with self-blame, Shin reassured her. He told Himari she didn't need to worry, because this child was theirs together. Shin promised he would always stay by her side, raising their child together as partners who complemented one another. He believed Himari would be a wonderful mother, and that their child's world would be bright and warm. Shin also informed her that her registration under the NEET Protection Act had been officially revoked. From now on, they were no longer an experimental couple, but an ordinary married couple. Thanks to Shin's words, Himari's anxiety eased, and gradually, the nightmares stopped. One day, the doorbell rang. It was Takumi and his father, but not only them. Shin's parents, along with his colleagues, had also come. To both Shin and Himari's surprise, this day had been secretly planned as their official wedding ceremony. The whole idea had come from Kohei and Yoshiura, who had quietly prepared everything in advance, inviting Shin's family and those closest to Himari. Shin was astonished, unable to take his eyes off Himari, who looked breathtaking in her wedding gown. Though the ceremony may have come late for everyone, it felt like the perfect moment, an opportunity to hold a celebration while also marking Shin and Himari's wedding anniversary. With the help and support of their friends and family, who had now become their true family, Shin and Himari expressed their heartfelt gratitude. Both felt immense happiness and were deeply thankful to God for blessing their lives. And that's it for the story series of this film. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to support this channel by subscribe, like and share. See you in the next video. Goodbye.